Today, I'm counting down the 20 biggest Hollywood paychecks ever. I've got all the usual suspects like DiCaprio and Tom Cruise, plus a couple of names I had no idea about until I started digging. And there's one guy who literally got paid $4 million for every minute he was on screen. Before the Amber Heard drama blew up, Johnny Depp was pretty much the guy everyone in Hollywood wanted. Seriously, it feels like a different world now. Back then, the whole Pirates franchise was built around him, and Disney knew it. So when they wanted a fourth movie, they had to pay up. Not just a little either. Depp got a $35 million upfront salary and a serious cut of the back end. Forbes later reported he made about $55 million for it, which with inflation is about $79 million today. That's just for one movie. Basically, Disney had no choice. On Stranger Tides ended up as the most expensive movie ever made at the time, over $400 million, partly because of Depp's deal. But it paid off. The movie made just over $1 billion worldwide. For Depp, that $55 million paycheck put him among the top 10 highest-paid actors ever for a single film, and it capped a wild run. He'd already made about $40 million for Pirates 2 and another $50 for Pirates 3. That era, 2007 to 2011, was Depp at the absolute peak of movie star money. Kinda crazy he blew it all away just buying random stuff. Tom Hanks in the 90s was on another level too. Hollywood's highest earner easily. With Saving Private Ryan, he and Spielberg both agreed to skip their upfront salaries to help keep the budget down. Instead, they took a piece of the film's gross, just a percentage of the money the movie made. Spielberg actually thought the movie would flop but wanted to make it anyway. He was just trying to tell the true story, not make a blockbuster. Of course, it did the exact opposite. Saving Private Ryan grossed $482 million worldwide and ended up the #1 movie of 1998. For Hanks, that deal meant he walked away with up to $40 million from profit participation. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $80. Same strategy he used on Forrest Gump. Less up front, more if the movie hits. Between those two movies, just 4 years apart, Hanks went from Oscar-winning actor to someone who could negotiate real power deals in Hollywood. If the movie was a hit, he'd pull producer money on top of everything else. DiCaprio only worked with Christopher Nolan once, but he picked the right project. For Inception, DiCaprio made a back-end deal. He took a pay cut on his usual $20 million fee, but in exchange, he got a percentage of the movie's revenues. Warner Brothers was nervous about the film. Inception is kind of too smart to be an obvious blockbuster, but it blew up and made $837 million worldwide. Forbes reported DiCaprio would get at least $50 million from the box office alone. Add in home video and TV, and his total payday was closer to $60 million in 2010 dollars. That's about $88 million today. That was the single biggest actor paycheck in 2010 and shot him right to the top of the Forbes list of highest paid actors. DiCaprio has said himself that his biggest paychecks come from taking a risk on back-end deals like this, rather than just upfront money. It worked out. Inception became one of the most profitable movies of his career. At least until Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, where he got $30 million up front. For a guy who once ended up in jail and was basically written off, Robert Downey Jr. pulled off one of the biggest comebacks in Hollywood. By the late 2010s, he was the face of the MCU. Nobody thinks of Tony Stark without seeing him. His Marvel contracts were famous for being huge. For Avengers Infinity War, he locked in profit participation on top of a massive salary. Infinity War earned him at least $75 million back in 2018, all thanks to his back-end deal. Adjusted for today, that's about $95 million. If you actually break it down by screen time, it's about $4.4 million per minute. It's crazy money, but Marvel was willing to pay it since Downey was the anchor for the entire franchise. His contract included bonuses for certain box office milestones, so as Avengers movies kept breaking records, he just kept cashing bigger checks. But if you think about it, without Downey and Jon Favreau, there is no MCU as we know it, so for Marvel Studios, that $95 million was money well spent. If Infinity War was huge for Downey, Endgame took it even further. Endgame ended up as the highest-grossing movie ever at the time, $2.8 billion worldwide. For that, Downey earned around $75 million again. That's his base pay, $20 million plus a massive share of the profits. Endgame's box office even triggered an extra $55 million bonus for him, on top of the upfront pay. That brought his total right back up to about $95 million in today's money. For anyone keeping score, that's over $2 million for every minute he's on screen in Endgame. The structure of his Marvel deal meant that as Marvel got bigger, Downey's checks just kept getting bigger too. For Infinity War and Endgame together, estimates say he pulled in over $150 million. These two movies locked in his spot as the highest-paid actor of the late 2010s. Even Marvel execs have admitted, yeah, he got a massive share because he's the one who started it all. Kind of insane to think it all started with a $500,000 payday for Iron Man. That little movie saved his career and kicked off the most successful movie franchise in history. Sandra Bullock is the only woman in the top 20 for highest paydays in film history, and it's all because of Gravity. She'd just come off winning the Oscar for The Blind Side, so her bargaining power was through the roof. Plus, Angelina Jolie just dropped out, and the studio needed a megastar to carry a film, and they needed it fast. So Bullock negotiated one of the biggest deals ever, $20 million up front, plus 15% of first dollar gross. That means she started getting a cut from the very first ticket sold, not just the net profits after the studio accountants have their fun. On top of that, Bullock also got paid on home video, TV, and every other revenue stream. Even industry insiders were shocked. First dollar gross deals are almost unheard of unless you're Robert Downey Jr. on Iron Man. Gravity turned into a monster hit, pulling in $723 million worldwide. Hollywood Reporter said Bullock was set to make at least $70 million once all the revenue was counted, with some estimates going north of 75. If you adjust that to 2025, you're looking at about $98 million. That's the highest ever for an actress in a single movie, and it made Bullock the highest-paid actress of 2013. Harrison Ford got an equally massive payday for coming back as Indiana Jones after a 19-year break. To make it happen, Paramount and Lucasfilm put together a unique deal. Instead of giant upfront salaries, Ford, Spielberg, and Lucas all agreed to split a huge share of the profits after the studio's costs were covered. So Ford got no upfront fee, but a huge piece of the box office and all the other revenue. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull cost $185 million to make, but it brought in $790 worldwide. Third biggest movie of 2008, right behind The Dark Knight and Iron Man. Ford made $65 million from this one film in 2008 dollars. Today, that's about $98 million. For comparison, he got about $4 or $5 million for each of the earlier Indiana Jones movies, so this was a massive jump. Ford was basically semi-retired before this, so the studio had to make it worth his while. They gave away profit percentage instead of salary, and it worked out. He ended up as the highest-paid actor in the world for 2008. By the time Iron Man 3 rolled around, Robert Downey Jr. was pretty much the king of Hollywood paychecks. After the Avengers blew up, he renegotiated his deal with Marvel, and the numbers just kept climbing. For Iron Man 3, Downey locked in a contract that's been reported at $75 million back in 2013 dollars. That was a huge base salary, around $50 million, and the rest came from box office bonuses. Iron Man 3 made $1.2 billion worldwide, so every point on those bonuses counted. Adjusted for today's dollars, that payday is about $105 million. That one movie basically paid him what he'd made across both previous Iron Man films combined. Marvel just couldn't afford to lose him, so they kept giving him more, and it set the standard for the crazy Avengers paychecks that came after. For 3 years running, he was the highest-paid actor in the world, all thanks to this run with Marvel. If you think back-end deals are a thing of the 90s, just look at Tom Cruise and Top Gun Maverick. For the sequel, Cruise took a pretty standard upfront fee, about $12.5 million, but the real money came from his share of the first dollar gross. That means he started getting paid a percentage from $1, not after the studio recoups costs. Most actors get a chunk of profit, but Cruise got a chunk of the total take. Maverick went to $1.5 billion worldwide, which made it the biggest hit of Cruise's entire career. It also pushed his payday to about $100 million in 2022. That's ticket sales, salary, streaming revenue, all in about $110 million today. It made Cruise the highest paid actor of 2022. Will Smith is one of the only actors in the modern era to break the $100 million mark on a single film, and he did it with Men in Black 3 back in 2012. Smith had all the leverage. He was the face of the franchise, so his contract included a massive back-end deal on top of a huge upfront salary. The movie made $624 million globally, and that's actually impressive considering they started shooting before the script was even finished. Barry Sonnenfeld, the director, admitted later that jumping into production with an unfinished script wasn't exactly smart. Budget was close to $250 million, and with a cost that high, the actual net profit for the studio wasn't huge. But for Smith, it didn't matter. Thanks to his deal, his total payday came out to about $100 million back then. Today, that's more like $140. That puts Smith in a very small club of actors to ever pull 9 figures from one movie. Just for context, his take from Men in Black 3 was actually bigger than what Robert Downey Jr. got for Avengers Endgame. The original Mission Impossible was Tom Cruise's first outing as both star and producer. He set up the deal under his new production company and made sure to lock in a huge piece of the profits on top of his acting fee. The movie blew up with $457 million worldwide, which was massive in 1996. Cruise didn't just take the normal paycheck. By producing and taking a share of the profits, he got a $70 million personal payday on that first movie alone. Adjusted for today, that's about $145 million. Just for comparison, the movie's actual budget was $80 million. That early decision is why Cruise's Mission franchise has basically been his personal goldmine for almost 3 decades. Even when the last one flopped, Cruise didn't walk away with no money, I'm sure. Tom Hanks made one of the smartest moves of his career with Forrest Gump. Instead of taking his usual $15 to $20 million paycheck, he went for points on the film's gross. That meant if the movie hit big, so would his bank account. Forrest Gump ended up as the top movie of 1994, $683 million worldwide, just behind The Lion King for the year. Hanks's deal paid off huge. He got around $60 million at the time, and that's after he personally paid out of pocket for at least 2 key scenes the studio didn't want to fund. One of them was the entire cross-country running sequence, by the way. In today's dollars, that's over $150 million. Just to put it in perspective, Hanks made more from Forrest Gump than the film's entire $55 million budget. And of course, he took home the Oscar for Best Actor. After this, Hanks basically stopped taking upfront salaries and just kept choosing profit participation instead. When Warner Brothers wanted Jack Nicholson as the Joker, he was the first and only piece in place. Not even Tim Burton or Michael Keaton were signed yet. Nicholson already had a string of box office hits and 2 Oscars, so to the studio, everything else was negotiable except him. Nicholson agreed to take a lower upfront salary, dropping from about $10 million to $6 million in exchange for a massive piece of the back end. He got around 15% of the box office gross, plus a cut of all the merchandise and sequel royalties. Batman ended up grossing over $400 million worldwide, and the merch was everywhere. It was the highest-grossing film in North America that year, second only to Indiana Jones globally. Because of that contract, Nicholson reportedly pulled in more than $60 million in 1989 dollars, which would be about $157 million today. That was an insane number for a single film, especially for playing the villain. Nicholson even managed to get top billing. His name comes before Batman's. Tom Cruise used the same playbook on War of the Worlds in 2005. No salary, just a cut of the first dollar gross. 20% right off the top. He partnered with Spielberg on this one, and the movie did huge numbers. Number 4 at the worldwide box office that year, $592 million total. Between his share of the gross and home video sales, which pulled in another $113 million, Cruise made around $100 from War of the Worlds. At the time, it was his biggest paycheck outside Mission Impossible. Adjusted for today, that's about $166 million. The studio never complained. A Paramount exec actually said Cruise was worth every penny because of what he delivered at the box office. Mission Impossible 2 is where Tom Cruise first pulled off a 9-figure payday. For the sequel, he skipped the upfront fee, no salary, and instead took a big piece of the box office, something like 30%. The movie pulled in more than $546 million worldwide, so Cruise's gamble paid off in a massive way. He ended up with about $100 million just from that one movie, and that's in $2,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's $189 million now. This was also his production company's project, so he got the producer credit on top of it. At the time, only Bruce Willis had ever pulled in a 9-figure payday like that. Cruise was already making $20 million per film, but Mission Impossible 2 put him in a whole different league. Bruce Willis's Sixth Sense deal is a textbook example of betting on back end. The studio needed him for a pretty low-budget thriller, so they gave him $14 million up front, plus 17.5% of the gross profits, plus a piece of the home video money. The movie became the second biggest hit of 1999, $673 million worldwide. Willis walked away with about $114 million total, most of that from the back end. That's almost $220 million in today's money. It's still one of the biggest paydays an actor has ever pulled from a single movie. The home video sales kept piling up. The Sixth Sense was the most rented movie of 2000, and every one of those tapes meant more money for Willis. He ended up as the top-earning actor of that year. Keanu Reeves set a new record with his Matrix sequel's payday. When they filmed Reloaded and Revolutions back-to-back, he didn't just take a big salary, he negotiated back-end points, which is a fancy way of saying he got a piece of the profits. Officially, he was paid about $30 million for both movies up front, but his share of the profits made the real difference. When the box office numbers came in, Reeves walked away with around $156 million total just from those two films. If you adjust that for inflation, that's roughly $275 million for one job. He even shared some of that with the visual effects crew, giving out big bonuses. Not many stars do that. Alec Guinness wasn't some random British actor who got lucky with Star Wars. By the time Lucas offered him Obi-Wan in 1976, Guinness was already a legend. He'd been in more than 50 films. He'd worked with David Lean multiple times, and he had an Oscar for The Bridge on the River Kwai. So when Fox came to him with the role, he had leverage. A lot of it. Fox's first offer was $150,000. Guinness basically said no unless they doubled it and gave him back-end points. This was one of the earliest profit-sharing deals in Hollywood and one of the smartest. He ended up with 2% of the back-end grosses, and after filming Wrapped, Lucas personally added another 0.25% as a goodwill bonus. When Star Wars hit, that tiny percentage turned into real money fast. Guinness made about $7 million from the initial 1977 release alone. That's already massive for the time. But the re-releases, home video, merchandising, everything kept paying out. By the year 2000, his total Star Wars earnings were estimated at $95 million. Adjusted to today, that's around $500 million. All for roughly 20 minutes of screen time in a movie he called fairy tale rubbish.